and welcome to Epiphanies. I'm Rev.Jessie Brandon, and I'm a life cycle celebrant as well as an ordained metaphysical minister. And on Epiphanies, I get to bring my two loves together, books and people. I invite you to settle into your favorite chair, grab a cup of tea or coffee, and let's see where we go. Today I'm looking at this book called The Mask of Masculinity by Lewis Howes. And it's about how men can embrace vulnerability, create strong relationships, and live their fullest lives. It says this is one of the most important topics today that seemingly no one is talking about, but men can take care of their emotional health in a 21st century that demands it. It's critical reading for any young or struggling man. So we're going to talk today with my guest, who is Alex Belleau.
Yes.
See, I knew I'd mess up.
That's okay.
He is a performance and mental wellness coach. He's the owner of Break the Mold, an NLP practitioner, timeline therapy, hypnotherapist, quantum change practitioner. He lives in the countryside in Beaton on a horse farm. We're going to talk later about how he does his work, but right now, Alex, such a pleasure to have you here with me today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So tell me, what drew you to this book?
It's really actually kind of geared towards myself. I've been doing a lot of self-exploration as much as I want to help other people. I find as a coach, you have to always really want to work on yourself.
Absolutely.
So I had a bunch of people tell me about this book, and it took me forever to actually pick it up. Mm-hmm. And once I did, I couldn't put it down.
That's really fabulous. Yeah. So tell me what really struck you about the book?
He was a regular guy. I mean, he was a very successful man, and everything seems to be going so well for him. Mm-hmm. So what could he really pick apart in his life that was so wrong? And I think that's really hard for most people to do nowadays, because everybody always wants to focus on the good, even when things aren't going so well.
Exactly.
But if you're able to really open that up and kind of crack down to the shell of what's going on, crack through the shell rather, then you can really find and uncover a lot of awareness around what's really holding you back from living the fullest life possible.
Mm-hmm. It's funny, I preach at a church, spiritual messages, and my message this week was, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that we've held such a strong front, that everything's great and you live a spiritual life and yeah, you got this. But it's not true.
No, and people need to realize that it's okay to be upset. It's okay to be mad or angry or sad. They have to really learn to go through the process if they really want to get over it. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I sure do. Now, do you work primarily with men?
That's my target focus. Mm-hmm. I have no problem taking on anybody that needs a hand.
Right.
I've always been somebody that wants to help others. Mm-hmm. But what I'm gearing towards is actually the working man.
Yeah, the working man.
Yeah.
Is there a part in the book that really struck you that you could read to me?
To be honest, there's not a particular passage that really stood out. The messages in each mask, as described, is fantastic. It's really well written. Mm-hmm. But what really kind of triggered me, and this is what really set my niche, was the statistic I read in there, and I've taken a look into it rather a few times, and men are 6 times more likely to commit suicide than women are.
Really?
6 times more likely.
I had no idea.
Well, neither did I. And that was the astounding part. And I think a lot of it has to do with really the first mask they talk about, the Stoic mask. Mm-hmm. Now, for people that don't know, the definition of Stoic is to actually be able to take a surmountable amount of pain.
Really?
And not show any expression, any emotion, or anything, right? They shoulder it all. Mm-hmm. It's like wearing a suit of armor, except what you're really allowing back in when you take that armor off is the ability to heal. Mm. So if people really get past that stoicism, allow themselves to be vulnerable, then they can really uncover what's going on behind everything else.
A friend of mine is starting a group in his home for men to share their feelings.
Wonderful.
When I talked to my partner, he said, "Oh, men don't do that."
No.
And he often points out to me, because of the work I do, he points out to me, Men would never do that. Women have it easier when it comes to emotions. And I guess it's true because we do express ourselves.
Yeah, I think more than anything, it's the stigma that's really been kind of put behind it. It's expected, apparently, for women to be able to talk about their emotions more freely. It's funny because there's another part in the book they actually describe that a woman is more likely, obviously, to turn to their friends, family, whomever, if they have any troubles. I think it was maybe 40% of them or so really turn to their husband or their partner or whomever when it comes to resolution in that sense, right? Whereas men, they rely on their wives. So you know the old saying, right? Behind every strong man is a stronger woman. Well, that's really kind of how it plays out. Men always rely on them. They don't rely on their friends or their family. They really hone in on the one individual person. And if you're really focused on them, you're not really getting all the help that you could be getting.
That's right.
So I'm not sure why it kind of grew in that direction, but in today's society, I mean, emotions are really starting to show up more in the male culture. Mental health is really starting to show up more overall between men and women. And I think, even though this book is geared towards men, I think this is a phenomenal read for women as well. Not only to better understand your man, but to also understand yourself a bit better too.
Absolutely. And what I was thinking while you were saying that about the man turning to his partner, you know, generally a woman, that we're specifically referring to right now, is that what I was thinking about that is if there's any issues in their relationship, it makes it even harder for him to talk.
Absolutely.
And it puts her in the position of maybe having answers or being better at counseling her man. That I think puts too much pressure on her and probably leads to problems.
Very much so.
Yeah.
I think that's a big issue too, because a lot of women don't know how to deal with that, right?
Exactly.
Men put on all these different masks and the women are supposed to react in a certain way. But how do you know how to react?
Yeah.
In reality, what should be happening, and that's what they do talk about primarily in that book, is letting your man be vulnerable, allowing him to experience those feelings and assure him that he's in a safe spot. And that way he can really kind of talk about what it is that's actually troubling him without the mask in front of him.
Exactly. Yeah, that's amazing. I was looking at this and saying, let's look at the traditional depiction of a real man. This is amazing. A real man must always be successful at everything he does, physically fit, strong, skilled at fixing things, good at sports, or at the very least, knowledgeable about them, attractive enough to women to be able to get in bed with them. And at the same time, he must never be interested in what women think about his appearance, too emotional, afraid, without the answer to a problem, and anything but first, most, or best, and seen crying. And that's huge. I have to tell you, the first time my partner cried, I was shocked at myself because the first thing I thought was, no, don't be doing that.
Yeah.
And it took me a lot of self-talk to say, you know, if I have the right to cry, so does he. And to just be able to listen to him and feel what was going on for him. And I don't have to have the answers.
No.
So
we're all human, right? We're all doing the best with what we have.
Yeah.
Regardless of what stage you are at in life, you only have a limited supply of tools. And that's why, again, as being a coach, you really need to keep growing your tool belt.
Absolutely.
You know? But, you know, in any given situation, you're dealing with whatever it is the best way that you know how. And sometimes that might not be what the other person needs, but at the same time, that's all you can do. So the best thing that anybody can do is just support them through their journey and allow them. You don't have to take on their pain. Just because they're experiencing it doesn't necessarily mean that you yourself have to shoulder that too, just because you're partners. The best thing often that you can do for most people, give them back their stuff. Let them hold on to their own bag and deal with it their own way.
It's funny because that reminds me, my daughter says to her partner all the time, that sounds like a you problem.
Well, pretty much.
Yeah, that's maybe a little too direct,
Yeah.
but I think that that's essentially what it is. So what I hear you saying is that we need to be able to not take on their stuff, and that's what I think is really the issue in a relationship where the man is only talking to the woman, because his stuff affects her, and it affects her stuff. And being able to parse that all down and just listen is a really good skill.
Absolutely.
But it's one that's tough to learn.
It's very tough to learn, and that's even a skill that I've had to learn myself over the years.
Yeah.
Now, the best part about this book too, and like I said, I'm going on my own journey. This actually started for me years ago. I only picked up this book within the last 6 months.
Really?
Yes.
Because didn't you tell me you've read it and listened to it about 6 times now? Yeah, so it's really got some good meat in it for you.
Yeah, well, I'm actually doing a piece on it as well on my Facebook page.
Yeah. What's your Facebook page called?
It's at Break the Mold Coaching.
Perfect. Okay.
Yes. So what I've been doing is a segment every week called Breaking Through. And what I'm actually identifying is the 9 different masks in which Lewis talks about, how they affect you in your life and how it actually has affected me personally. So every week I give a new example of how this mask actually applies to me, how I've seen it in my own life. But most importantly, at the end of the segment, I always explain how to shed the mask.
That is so perfect right there, because when I work, and when I'm at the church, I'm always talking about my stories, because I think that's the best way to show people that I really know what this is about,
Yeah.
and to show them that it's really, normal, to use a word that gets overused.
For sure.
To feel these feelings. So I'm really happy to hear that you do this piece where you're talking about how it affected you.
Well, the best part that I like about it, first off, while I'm doing this, my emotions and my tensions are high as well too, right? I'm sharing things with the world that I have a hard enough time, or had a hard enough time sharing with my own wife.
Now, how long have you been married?
About 4 years now.
And you have
2 kids.
2 kids?
Yep, 5
Great.
and 2. They're Jackson and Dallas.
Yes.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But that's the point, right? If I'm doing this for myself, I want to promote that for my own children. I want to better the future. In reality, I want to change the world. But if I can change one person's life, that's even better.
Yeah.
Because that one person will have a rippling effect.
Yeah, and it's so important, if I can just
Absolutely.
kind of give you my thought on this, it's so important that the first person that you change the life of is yourself.
100%.
And so doing the work yourself before taking it out to other people is so important. There's so many people that don't realize that they just need to dig in and find themselves and be okay
Absolutely.
with everything, the dark and the light. And, because we all have our shadow self. And like I said before, it's okay to not be okay.
For sure.
And the thing I love about doing this kind of work is the fact that when you get right down to your own feelings, you can become the observer self. And instead of creating conflict or getting into conflict with other people, if you can observe yourself and say, oh, wow, I just got really angry about that. I wonder what that's about.
Absolutely.
I wonder, is it historical? Is it something to do with them that really is a reflection of me?
Now, you're talking perception is projection now.
Yep, that is true. And isn't that the way a lot of people communicate?
Very much so, and that's the problem, right? Whenever you see an issue in somebody else, if it really bothers you that much, chances are it's because you yourself do the same thing, and you don't even realize it.
Absolutely.
But if you find it so irritating about somebody, start with yourself. Change that first, because then at least you're leading by example at this point.
Right, but it's really hard to see that happening and see that it's really about you. So what would you suggest to somebody to try it? How would you start that process?
I would tell them to take a step back. I would tell them to take a breath, because the hardest part when you're in that situation is typically the tension. It's the emotions that are present. So you want to react.
Yeah.
You want to jump into it, when really what you should be doing is just take a second. Take a breath and really think about what's going on.
Yeah.
Does it have to do with them, or does it really just have to do with you?
Or is it something I always used to say to my daughter, pick the hill you want to die on? Because is this an argument that you really need to have build up into a conflict? And is it something that, can you let it go And I know the old term is compromise.
For sure.
And I don't know that it's as much about compromise as it is just accepting what is.
Very much so.
And what can I change? What do I want to change? Can I let this go?
The best place to start change is, like you said, with yourself. And I find that in particular, most people resist.
Yes.
Everybody wants to change everybody else, but nobody wants to change themselves.
Right. Well, change is scary.
Change is scary, but the benefit of actually going through the change is what happens after. You take all these little steps and it feels uncomfortable, you feel scared, you feel insecure, vulnerable, whatever it may be. But when you're through to the other side, when you've actually faced it, dealt with it, and moved past it, really moved past it, the benefits are huge. You can change your entire world in no time flat. It's just all about up top.
Yeah. Well, okay. It's all about the mind brain.
Absolutely.
Let me hear about the heart brain. Do you?
I think it's connected.
Yeah.
I think everything's connected. Mind, body, soul. It's all one entity.
Yeah.
And it's really just changing the views of how you look at the world.
Yeah, it really is. I have another friend also in the holistic business, and she talks about the three brains, the belly brain, the heart brain, and the mind brain. And she talks about the belly brain. That's your gut instinct. That's what we're talking about. And that's the piece of you that knows what's right for you, knows when to stop and wait a minute. I mean, I swear to God, catches me every time when I'm leaving the house and it's like, okay, what did I forget? And if I just take that moment and check in with my gut and think, okay.
I left the oven on.
Yeah, the typical left the oven on, yeah. With me, it's usually, what did I do with my car keys?
They're usually hidden in my bed somewhere.
Your keys are in your bed. Oh no, mine are usually at least near the front door or in my purse.
Well, I'd like to hang them on the hook, but sometimes we get forgetful.
Yeah,
we're all human.
I think what's going to be on my tombstone is, where'd I leave my phone? Isn't that amazing too, how we've become so what's the word?
Dependent.
Thank you. Dependent on our phones. Like, we used to leave home and the phone was there and we went out and did our thing, and if people couldn't reach us, they'd call back. And then there was the miracle of answering machines.
Yeah.
And, they could let us know they were trying to find us. And now, if I leave without my phone, I'm lost.
Well, I find it funny because I'm at that age group. I'm only 31 years old. And I'm at that age group right now where I've seen all that transition over the course of my own life. I mean, I still remember when I was a kid, cell phones didn't exist. My dad, I remember, had a car phone.
Yeah.
Remember the corded car phones?
Yes.
Yeah, he had one of those. I'd be outside rollerblading, whatever, no way to contact me, but everybody knew that everyone was safe. I'd be on my rollerblades or on my bike, whatever it was, and I'd always be out with friends. But now you're so dependent on the phone, everybody has one. I mean, heck, elementary school kids have them.
Yes.
It's ridiculous, and everybody's so glued to it. As soon as you put yourself in front of that screen, you're sucked right in.
Absolutely.
So interaction is really starting to decline in that sense.
That's where I was going to take it, was people are no longer talking to each other.
No.
And things are so misconstrued when it's just a text or a PM.
Well, that's the problem with text messaging, social media, so on and so forth, right? I mean, in terms of text messaging, there's no expression. People put in the emoticons and whatnot, but that still can get misconstrued so easily. You put the emphasis on one word compared to a different one, and you change the entire sentence.
And body language is so much of communication. I think, isn't it something like 70 or 80% of?
I'm trying to remember the breakdown right now. Only 7% of what's actually spoken is communication. I think it was 55% was body language.
Okay.
35 was tonality. Yeah, I'm trying to remember the last one there.
Yeah.
I'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, the funny thing about statistics is we can move those numbers around any way we want, so you kind of can't trust them. But I know that for me, if I'm not seeing somebody, I'm very visually driven anyway, but if I can't see somebody, then I don't know what they're really saying or meaning.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So I would take that to mean then, how do you do your work with your
with my clients?
Your clients, yeah.
I mean, it always starts over the phone. Generally, there's been a few times where I have received text messages, but I always try to gear it hoping that, maybe they'll be comfortable enough to actually call. And at least then I can hear their voice, right?
Right.
And at that point, we always bring them in. So I'll always start off with a detailed personal history, and that way I really get to know the client. You know, not just what's going on with them, what's bothering them, but really who they are as a person. Get to know more about their family, their upbringing, so on and so forth, and really kind of dive into the problem. But the thing is, and that's the cool part about what it is that I do, is it's not like traditional therapy, traditional counseling, or psychiatry.
Okay.
Instead of it prolonging, instead of it taking in reality months or years to figure out what the problem is, we're going to hone in on it on day one.
Okay, and what do you see the process is? Do you think it has to do with digging through your past?
No.
Okay, what is it?
See, the digging all happens in day one.
Okay.
After that, it's really taking ownership for what's happened in your life. And that's the biggest thing. Everybody wants to blame other people. There's a typical frame that we talk about, cause versus effect. And that frame there, long and short, it really is which way you're looking. What are you looking at? What are you paying attention to? Are you paying attention to all the negativity? Or are you looking for solutions? Are you blaming other people? Or are you planning to succeed? And that's the big difference, right? Everybody always wants to blame everybody else for their own faults, for their own mishaps. But in reality, you're the one that woke up in the morning. You're the one that put on your shoes. You're the one that got in your car. You're the one that took a drink. It doesn't matter what it is. You are the driver behind the wheel. Somebody else isn't driving your bus. You are.
Right. 100% responsibility for self.
Absolutely.
I know that when I've been in therapy myself, in the past, I'm fine now. But they used to say, like, you're 50% of the responsibility. You bring your 50%. No, you bring your 100%. Because everything that you're doing, saying, the movements, everything telegraphs your history that you're carrying.
Absolutely.
And so what you want to do is look at how that's driving your bus and accept that while you're not responsible for someone, say, hitting you, you are 100% responsible for what you brought to the table in the way you say it.
Absolutely.
In what you're trying to point out about the other person. I heard a phrase once that I just love, and it's, if I only ever ask you about you and I only ever tell you about me, then we cannot be in conflict. And I really love that, because I'm not telling you who you are or what you're doing. And so I'm just asking you, how do you feel? What do you think makes you do that? Let's talk about how I feel about that, not to center it on me, but to say, there's this other old phrase, when you do this, it makes me feel this way. So if you could not do that, it would help me. Well, that only works the first couple of times, because then it becomes a control thing. I can stop your behavior by saying that, and then I don't have to do anything. So it's better for me to have asked you, what was your intention? This is how I heard it. Did you mean to say that?
Because then you can actually have a conversation.
Totally.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's a big thing too, right? It's the conversation that's really missing these days. Again, going back to social media, it's the fact that everybody's showing all the good parts. They're showing all the highlights. It's a highlight reel. It doesn't matter what platform you are. It's really showing the best of whatever's going on in your life, but nobody wants to show the worst.
Yeah, my daughter's always taking pictures of her meals before she eats it.
My wife does that.
I take pictures of mine once I'm halfway through.
That's me.
Yeah, this is so good. I couldn't wait to take the picture.
Yeah, I was only 30 seconds into eating it. It's half gone.
Yeah, true. So, if you had the chance to do things over again, is there anything you'd change?
No.
No. Tell me why.
How I got to being a coach myself is because I went through it. I was a client. I battled mental health issues my entire life. I was diagnosed a few years back now with severe anxiety and depression. And it almost ruined my life. I almost allowed it to ruin my life, really.
Yeah.
And once I finally started, it came down to just getting fed up of not having the answers. You can cover it up with anything. You can cover it up with medication, with alcohol, drugs. It doesn't make the problem go away. It just numbs it. It just dulls it down for the time being. What you really need to do is find the answers. So years ago, I went on my own search. And that's what really started this transition in myself. I've always wanted to help people. That's how that's been built in me since I was a little boy. But I didn't know how. And having gone through that, having actually experienced what I did, it gave me my purpose back. It realized what it is I needed to do, and I needed to share that message that you don't have to live with the mental stigma.
Right.
You don't have to live with the illness. It's not a disease. It's not something that has to stay with you.
Now, do you think that anxiety is something you can cure? Not you personally, but one can cure?
Yes.
I'm so happy to hear you say that, because that's how I feel too.
Yeah.
I myself was diagnosed with severe depression and anxiety, and it becomes a habit.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a strategy.
Yeah.
And that's where the other part of my practice comes into play.
Oh, cool.
NLP is all based on strategies.
Okay.
Well, it's actually a whole bunch of different patterns, but that's the big chunk of it is strategy work. So what we do is we focus on what the strategy is, the one that doesn't work for you. Everybody has a strategy for everything, yes? You wake up in the morning, get yourself ready, you get ready for work, go to work, conduct your day.
Do you not find that you're also having conversations with yourself
Always.
about what somebody said to you yesterday and how you're going to deal with it today? And you can set yourself into an anxiety kind of habit.
It's because you're playing a nightmare in your head.
Exactly.
And that's a big problem too, right? When things just get stuck in here, you're not putting it on paper, you're not expressing it to other people. You know, you're just living inside your own head. And the funny thing is that person, say for instance using that example, is also in your head too. They're staying there rent free.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, assuming that you know why they did what they did and what they're going to say when you say this, all of that can lead you down a nasty road.
But that's the thing. If you're the one making the nightmare in your own head, why don't you make it into a movie that you like?
Yeah, yeah. Very
Change
good.
the movie, change the outcome.
Another saying somebody said to me, I love sayings, I love things that really make you think, and the way to affect change is to increase the pain of remaining the same.
Ooh, I like that.
Isn't that cool? Because
Can you say that one more time?
the way to effect change is to increase the pain of remaining the same. So I think that that's
like
what we do to ourselves.
Absolutely.
And some of us get it and some of us don't. And it's just a matter of they're coming to the trough a little bit later maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you want to change yourself, then do the things that you do that cause you pain, just up it a little bit and really see yourself doing it. I'm so happy to have you here with me today,
Thank you so
Alex.
much.
I really appreciate your time, and I can't wait for people to be able to talk to you directly. Speaking of which, if you have any questions about the book and about my guest today, please email me, and that'll be on the screen as well. Alex's information will be there for you, and you can contact him. He's in the country in Beaton on a horse farm. Why would you not want to go there? Thank you so much for joining me today on Epiphanies, and I'll see you next week.
Thanks for having me.